Okay. Um, so I'm going to go through some of. I'm going to go through the review, and I'm going to try to hit the points that um, typically give people trouble. I'm not going to go over everything verbatim. Like for example, you know, to be able to define homeostasis, that's pretty easy. So I don't really need to cover that. Okay. So we're going to do that with the endocrine, with the blood, and cardio. Okay, and also if you have any questions, feel free to say something. Okay. All right. Um, okay. So what does a hormone bind to? That would be a target receptor. Okay. Um, Also, you might read target tissue or target organ. Okay, so that's the main thing is a target receptor and also target tissue, target organ. Okay. Okay. Some of the major differences between steroid and non-steroid hormone is a steroid hormone can easily diffuse across the cell membrane and it has direct gene activation. And a non-steroid hormone needs to bind to a cell receptor. Okay, so you have a cell and there's a receptor and the hormone has to bind. Okay, so that would be a non-steroid hormone version. The steroid version is the hormone goes directly into the cell, diffuses across the cell membrane. Okay, and that's considered direct gene activation. Okay, a G protein is a second messenger. Okay, so inside the cell, okay, when the hormone binds, that would be step one. Okay, now remember the goal is to get into the middle. So step one, the hormone binds, and then step two, you're going to activate the inside of the cell through second messengers. And a G protein is an example of a second messenger. So at that point, the G protein inside of the cell is going to tell the cell what to do. Okay, so these are all in the notes, self-explanatory. It's just definitions. Okay, so know what um, hormonal means, humoral and neural. Okay, what hormones are released from the anterior pituitary gland? And there's a lot of them. Okay. So in no particular order, uh, growth hormone, follicle stimulating hormone. So let me do this. Growth hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, thyroid stimulating hormone, prolactin, ACTH, which is adrenocorticotropic hormone, okay, you also have okay, we'll actually get back to that because we're going to draw some diagrams on these because down here, yeah, all this stuff. So we're going to work on some of those. Okay. Okay, what hormones are released from the posterior pituitary? Okay, that would be ADH and oxytocin. All right, let's see. So for the following, where's the hormone released from? Where's the hormone going? What does the hormone do when it gets there? Okay, so we're going to do that in just a minute with a lot of these. Okay. Okay, so let's dive into some of these. Okay. All right, let me pull up a different. Actually, wait. I'm gonna just add to this. All right. Okay, so if you want to grab a pen and paper, I'm going to be drawing a bunch of flow charts here. Okay. To kind of explain how these hormones work. All right. Okay, so are you ready? Do you have paper, pen? Okay, cool. Okay, so let's start with uh, the hypothalamus. Okay, hold on, I'm gonna use a different program. That one's not working right. Let me do this screen share with you. Okay. The hypothalamus releases growth hormone releasing hormone, which goes to the anterior pituitary gland, which tells the anterior pituitary to release growth hormone. And growth hormone will go to tissue to promote growth. Okay, it goes to muscle, and that promotes increased protein synthesis. okay? And it can go to adipose tissue to increase lipolysis, which means fat breakdown. Okay. All right, next, actually, let me pause for a second. Get my chat thing up here. Okay, did you see that? Alex, were you able to see me draw that out? Okay, great. Okay, next is we'll do follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. Now remember, what we're doing for now is coming from the anterior pituitary, okay? So the hypothalamus releases gonadotropin releasing hormone, okay? So remember, the gonads, which is what that stands for, gonadotropin. The gonads in men are the testes, and the gonads in women are the ovaries. Okay, so the hypothalamus releases gonadotropin releasing hormone, which goes to the anterior pituitary to release follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. Okay. Follicle stimulating hormone in men goes to the testes. In women goes to the ovaries. Okay, in the testes, specifically it goes to the Sertoli cells. And that activates spermatogenesis. Okay, which means the production of sperm cells. Okay, in women, goes to the ovaries, and that helps develop the follicle. Thus, the word follicle stimulating hormone, so it helps develop the follicle. Okay. The luteinizing hormone part for men goes to the testes. Specifically to the Leydig cells. And that produces testosterone. Okay. And testosterone also influences spermatogenesis. Okay, in women, it goes to the ovaries, and it helps with ovulation. Okay, so these are examples of our formula, which is where is the hormone coming from? Where is the hormone going? And then what does it do? So what's the function of the hormone when it gets there? So that's what we're going to be doing with all these. Where is the hormone coming from? Where is the hormone going? And what does it do when it gets there? All right. Okay. Next would be, let's do thyroid stimulating hormone. Okay, um, so we'll do that in prolactin. All right, so the hypothalamus releases thyroid releasing hormone, and that goes to the anterior pituitary, which tells that to release the thyroid stimulating hormone. Okay, so the answer is kind of in the word there. It's thyroid stimulating hormone. Well, what's going to be stimulated? Well, the thyroid. Okay. So the thyroid is going to release your T3 and T4. Okay, so T3 is the triiodothyronine. T4 is the thyroxine. Okay, and these go to most of the cells in the body, and the function is to increase your basal metabolic rate, which means it increases metabolism, also helps increase protein synthesis. Okay, hypothalamus releases prolactin releasing hormone, which goes to the anterior pituitary, tells it to release prolactin. Okay, prolactin goes to the mammary glands in women, and this synthesizes the synthesis of milk production. Okay, so that would be for prolactin. Okay. Okay, next is the ACTH. Okay, so the hypothalamus releases corticotropic releasing hormone. Okay, corticotropic releasing hormone, which goes to the anterior pituitary. Tells the anterior pituitary to release adrenocorticotropic hormone, which goes to the adrenal cortex to release cortisol, cortisol when cortisol is released, okay, if it goes to the liver, that increases glucose synthesis via glucose or gluconeogenesis. Okay. It also has an anti-inflammatory response and also suppresses the immune system. Okay. It goes to muscle. Okay, that is going to increase protein breakdown. And then if it goes to, or when it goes to adipose tissue, okay, that is going to increase lipolysis, okay, which is the breakdown of fat. Okay. All right, Alex, so far so good? Okay, good. All right. Okay, some other hormones. Let's do calcitonin. Okay, so the para follicular cells in the thyroid okay, release calcitonin. Okay, which goes to bone, and it tells bone to increase its calcium storage. Also helps decrease blood calcium levels. So if you eat a high calcium diet, lots of calcium in the blood, no problem. Calcitonin is released and puts calcium in bone. Okay, the parathyroid releases parathyroid hormone. It's when it goes to bone, it removes calcium from bone. Okay, and if that happens, this is going to increase blood calcium levels. So that being said, that means your body is currently experiencing hypocalcemia. Okay, hypocalcemia means not enough calcium in the blood. So your body goes, no problem, you're not going to eat it or whatever, I'll just get it from bone. So that's one way parathyroid hormone is released. Okay, if it goes to the kidneys, then it is going to produce or help produce the active form of vitamin D. Okay. Um, Give me one sec to look at some other hormones here. All right, I'm gonna do a screen share with you. Okay, so we're back on the hormone page. All right, so on some of these, we're just gonna cover it right here. Hold on a sec, bud. Okay. Um, so ADH, well, let me go back to, so I'll do ADH and oxytocin. Okay, So the posterior pituitary releases ADH and oxytocin. Okay, so the stimulus okay, the stimulation is change in blood pressure. Okay, so that's important. The stimulation is a change in blood pressure, more specifically, a decrease in blood pressure. Okay, so that's important to know. Okay, this is detected, so the baroreceptors in the body okay, so the baroreceptors, which are found in the aorta and the carotid sinus, which are arteries in our body. Okay, there's nerve receptors in there. When they pick up on that, okay, they're going to tell the hypothalamus to release ADH, okay, from the posterior pituitary. All right, when ADH goes to the blood vessels, it tells the blood vessels to vasoconstrict, okay, which means it goes from a large diameter tube to a small tube. Okay, so it constricted, the tube got smaller. Okay, because it's a smaller tube, this increases peripheral resistance. Okay, and when you increase peripheral resistance, this makes the pump works harder. And the way we say that is increases the blood pressure. Okay. Now remember, what caused this is the person had a drop in blood pressure. Okay, so if the blood pressure is too low, that's not good. So the body can compensate, and in this case, it's doing it through vasoconstriction, which increases blood pressure. So within homeostasis, this is normal, this is good, this is fine. However, this can spin out of control and force a person to be in chronic high blood pressure over time, which is not good. Okay, oxytocin. All right, so that's let's see, yeah, posterior pituitary releases oxytocin, which goes to the uterus, and this is during pregnancy. Okay, and it's responsible for uterine muscle contraction during childbirth or during labor. And the muscle contraction is designed to help push the baby out. Okay. Let me go back to the Word document. Okay. All right, so from here, insulin is, it helps lower blood sugar levels. Okay, so it's released from the pancreas. Okay, more specifically, the beta cells. Right. Glucagon activates gluconeogenesis. Okay, released from the alpha cells. Okay, so estrogen and progesterone are released by the ovaries to aid in monthly cycles in women. Okay, we already did prolactin and testosterone. Okay, serotonin is released by the gut and brain, and it's a mood, appetite, hormone. All right, so cortisol is for stress. We talked about that a little bit ago. Okay, melatonin is released from the pineal gland. And it's responsible for sleep. And it's activated by absence of sunlight. Okay, epinephrine, norepinephrine released by the adrenal medulla. Okay, to help with sympathetics, the sympathetic nervous system, also known as stress. Okay, and there's exercise, which is a form of stress, you know, because it elevates your heart rate, dilates the bronchioles in the lungs, increases blood flow. And then there's the, we'll just say, unhealthy form of stress, just being pissed off and angry and all that other stuff, okay? So when the body is stressed, it releases epinephrine, norepinephrine. Okay, atrial natriuretic peptide. Okay, that comes from, so if you think, all right, hold on. So the atria is in the heart, okay? Na is sodium. So this is a hormone released from the heart that is going to do something with sodium. All right. Actually, I want to get back to that other screen, so give me a second to draw this one out. Okay. The atrial natriuretic peptide. Okay. The stimulus okay, the stimulation is going to be an increase in blood pressure. Okay. So in the heart, and here's the right side of the heart, here's the left side of the heart. Okay, that right atrium, okay, this side would be the left atrium, this would be the right ventricle, and that would be the left ventricle. So out of the right atrium, okay, it's going to release this atrial natriuretic hormone. You might also see it as atrial natriuretic peptide. Okay, but it is a hormone. And when it goes to the kidneys, it is going to increase urine production. Okay, another way of saying this is it decreases urine concentration. Okay, so think about something that's very concentrated. So if I gave you, like concentrated Kool-Aid, all you have to do is add water. And if you add water, you're decreasing the concentration, okay, by increasing fluid. Okay, so increase urine production means you're decreasing the urine concentration, okay? So when this happens, you're going to get a decrease in blood volume, which means you're going to get a decrease in blood pressure. All right, so remember, the stimulus is high blood pressure. So this is another method to help, or a method to help lower blood pressure by decreasing blood volume, which means you're decreasing blood pressure. Okay, so think about that. If you have a lot of volume in a tube, lots and lots and lots of fluid in a tube, that's a lot of pressure to push fluid through a tube because water is heavy, fluid is heavy, okay? So if you can reduce the amount of fluid in a tube, then you decrease the amount of pressure needed. Okay, so when the atrial natriuretic hormone or peptide is released, it will go to the blood vessels. Okay, and it causes them to relax, which means they go from small to large. They're more relaxed. Okay, a big open tube is easier to push fluid through. It takes a lot of pressure to push fluid through a small tube. So the blood vessels relax, and when this happens, it causes a decrease in peripheral resistance. Okay, and that's another way of saying decreases blood pressure, or you could say decreases the load, the preload to the heart. Okay, so the heart doesn't have to work as hard. The pump does not have to work as hard. Okay. Okay, erythropoietin. So the stimulus is decreased oxygen. So erythropoietin goes to the bone marrow to spit out a bunch of red blood cells. And the more red blood cells you have, the better your oxygen carrying capacity. Okay. HCG is released from the placenta. And it helps to maintain pregnancy. Okay, the melanocyte stimulating hormone is released from the anterior pituitary, and it goes to skin, and it's responsible for, let's just say, skin darkening, such as having a tan. Okay, relaxin is released by the placenta. And it helps loosen up the joints, especially the hip, in the pregnant mom. So that child delivery is a little bit easier because the joints and the hip and all that are more relaxed. So that's where relaxin gets its name from. Okay, this one we'll draw out. This one's kind of complicated, so let's draw that one out on this other page. Okay, so this actually falls under the renin angiotensin aldosterone mechanism. The renin angiotensin aldosterone mechanism. Okay, so the stimulation, okay, so the stimulation is a decrease in blood volume and a decrease in blood pressure. So that is what the person currently is experiencing. Now, when you hear this, meaning the stimulation is decreased blood volume and decreased blood pressure, you automatically know the goal is going to be do the opposite of this. So now the goal is to get the blood volume up and the blood pressure up, okay? So like, if the stimulus is you're really cold, well then the goal is to get warm. So we put a jacket on, we turn the heat on, that kind of thing. All right. Okay, so all right, so in the kidney, okay, it releases renin, okay, which is an enzyme. Okay, now over here on the right side, we have the liver, okay, it makes and releases angiotensinogen. Okay, it makes and releases angiotensinogen. Okay, in the presence of renin, it converts the angiotensin into, excuse me, it converts the angiotensinogen, okay, converts it into angiotensin 1. Okay, which is a protein. Okay, angiotensin 1 goes to the lungs. Okay, where it is converted into angiotensin 2. Okay, it does this from the, so it's converted by ACE, which is angiotensin converting enzyme. Okay, So angiotensin converting enzyme, or ACE, and this is why they give ACE inhibitors if the person needs it. Okay, so the ACE is considered a very powerful vasoconstrictor. Okay, now remember, the stimulus here is low blood volume, low blood pressure. Well, if you go from a big tube to a smaller tube, the smaller tube, which is vasoconstriction, the pump has to work harder to push fluid through a smaller tube. So therefore, it starts to increase the pressure. Okay, now angiotensin 2 goes to the adrenal cortex. Okay, there's your adrenal gland. The outside part is the cortex. The inside part is the medulla. Okay, so it goes to the adrenal cortex and tells it to release aldosterone. Okay, and aldosterone, okay, remember, in the presence of aldosterone, you keep sodium and get rid of potassium. So by keeping sodium, okay, you're going to keep fluid. Okay, so these go together with this aldosterone package. So by keeping sodium and keeping fluid, you're going to also increase blood pressure and increase blood volume. Okay. So remember, with this stuff, kind of an easy way of looking at it, anytime you have a stimulus of low blood volume, low blood pressure, the goal is to now do the opposite. We got to increase the blood volume, increase the blood pressure. Just like if the stimulus is you're too cold, we got to get you warm. Okay. All right. Okay, Alex, you still good? Okay. All right. These are pretty self-explanatory from the notes. Had a lot of good stuff in there. Okay. So the quick version of iodine is it is for thyroid function. Iodine is also good for your immune system. It's also good for reproductive tissue. Okay. But one of the things I think I focused on in the notes on the online videos and PowerPoint stuff is the fact that it is a main ingredient for thyroid health and thyroid hormone function. Okay, a goiter is an enlargement of the thyroid because of iodine deficiency. Okay, Graves' disease is a hyperthyroidism. So hyperthyroidism, too much thyroid hormone is being released, which increases metabolism too much. You typically have very thin and fast-growing hair. They can retain fluid behind the eyes and in their legs. Okay, that's epinephrine, norepinephrine. Okay, sympathetics is fight or flight. Parasympathetics is rest and digest. Okay, so in the notes I had very distinct ways of diagnosing type 1 and type 2. Let's see. All right. So acromegaly and gigantism is a growth hormone problem. Okay, so abnormal release of growth hormone will get you too big, and the bones also get too big. Okay, any questions for you from endocrine? All right, so let me do blood. Let me share this with you. All right, let's see if there's anything. So a lot of this is, quite frankly, pretty easy to find in the notes and write about. What things are found in the plasma portion of blood. I had a bunch of pictures of that. Okay, these were pretty clear. What is the function of albumin, globulin, fiber? These are proteins. Whoops. Okay. Okay, erythrocyte is a red blood cell. Leukocyte's a white blood cell. Okay, erythrocytes help you carry oxygen. Leukocytes are white blood cells that help defend you. Platelets help with clotting. Okay, red blood cells live about 120 days. Anucleated means there's no nucleus. Okay, so nucleus means mitochondria, which means energy. So it would not make sense for a red blood cell to have a nucleus because it would burn through the oxygen that's on it. Okay. All right, these are easily confused, okay, because they sound similar. Try not to confuse them. So EPO is erythropoietin. Okay, so those are the same thing. So EPO is erythropoietin, which is the hormone that causes erythropoiesis. Okay, so erythropoiesis is the making of the red blood cells. Okay, so the answer to this is usually low oxygen or a low blood count, which those feed off of each other. I mean, if you, let's say you bled out a lot, or had a lot of blood drawn from a phlebotomist, then automatically you're going to have decreased oxygen carrying capacity. Okay, so hematopoiesis is that process of producing red blood cells. Okay, the AKA for hematopoiesis is the erythropoiesis. All right, the pro-erythroblasts eventually turn into red blood cells. The myeloblasts eventually turn into the granulocytes. Okay, which are the bins. So basophil, eosinophil, and neutrophil. Lymphoblasts turn into the lymphocytes. Monoblasts into monocytes. And megakaryoblast into platelets. And those are granulated. Okay, quick version with the function of these white blood cells is defense. In the lab video and lecture video, I got specific on what they do. Okay, so white blood cell, what is the function? Well, they have that Pac-Man effect. Okay, leukocyte versus lymphocyte. They sound similar. Okay, leuco means white, so leukocytes are white blood cells. A lymphocyte is a type of white blood cell. Okay, blood doping is where you take the blood out of your body and you put it in a bag and you refrigerate it, and because you now have less blood in your body is going to make more red blood cells, and then right before your competition you put the refrigerated blood back into your body, which increases the amount of red blood cells, which means it increases oxygen carrying capacity. So that's called blood doping. That is risky. It can kill you and cause other problems because the blood at this point is too thick. It's too much stuff floating around in your tubes. Okay, this is short for hemoglobin. And hemoglobin allows, so here's a red blood cell. There's your hemoglobin, and it allows oxygen to bind to it. Iron is involved, so Fe is iron, and it allows for 4 binding sites. So that's what this was, the 4 binding sites. Viscosity is thickness of blood. Okay. Oxyhemoglobin is the ability of oxygen to bind to that part of the hemoglobin. Deoxyhemoglobin is the ability for CO2 to bind. And the carb-aminohemoglobin has to do with the combination of oxygen and hemoglobin at the tissue site. Okay, the answer is 4. How many proteins are attached to one hemoglobin? And that's this. Those 4 binding sites. Okay, where is iron absorbed from the body? Okay, it is, oh my goodness. Let's see, the intestine. Okay, so if a person has a busted gut, they're going to have a hard time absorbing iron. Okay, red blood cells eventually die after about 120 days. And then the body starts to take takes the hemoglobin off, okay, and then breaks it down. So the iron and the proteins are basically recycled. Okay, a platelet plug is for very small broken vessels, blood vessels. Coagulation is larger wound. Clotting. Okay, so the ability of the body to stop bleeding, either super tiny stuff or larger wounds, coagulation. Okay. Okay, we have, I think, 14 different factors in the body. Von Willebrand is one of those factors. So some of the all the factors are named, factor 1, factor 2, all the way to factor 14. But some of them, like von Willebrand factor, has, they have AKAs, okay? So von Willebrand factor is factor 8. And it's a key part to the clotting process. Okay, thromboxanes. So remember, a thrombo is the clotting process. So this helps activate platelet aggregation. Okay, and aggregation means clumping together. Okay, where the platelets, well, the cells all gathered together, so they were all spread out. Now it's all clumped together. Okay, so that's aggregation. Okay, so you have that V, which is technically Roman numeral for factor 5. Okay, so factor 5 problems will lead to blood clotting issues. Okay, so factor 5 is part of the cascade of events to help with coagulation, but if there's a problem, like a mutation in the gene, then which is an inherited disorder, it's going to cause thrombosis, okay, abnormal thrombosis stuff. Okay, fibrin is that, I like to call it the spider web. It's basically like the proteins that finally like get sticky and all that, just like a spider web. Okay, I had pictures and stuff on the videos and the PowerPoints and so forth. Okay, extrinsic versus intrinsic pathways. Okay, extrinsic means outside of the blood injury, and intrinsic means inside the blood injury. Okay, so there's damage, and then the factor, I'm skipping some steps here for simplicity reasons. Okay, so factor 7 is released, which activates factor 10. Okay, on the intrinsic, there's damage, and it's factor 12, that is activated. Okay, which activates factor 10. So the goal is to get that factor 10 activated. So extrinsically, it's either factor 7 that does it. If it's intrinsic, it's factor 12 that does it. Okay. So once factor 10 is activated, that activates prothrombin, which turns which now is turned into thrombin. Okay. So thrombin now activates factor 13 plus calcium. Okay. When that happens, it takes fibrinogen, turns it into fibrin, and that's the fibrin clot. Okay, that spider web. Okay, so what I just wrote in the notes will have that 56 through 60 there. Okay, vitamin K is important because it's part of coagulation, helps with the coagulation process. 4 different types of soluble vitamins, A, D, E, and K. Okay, so this is basically asking about blood types. You know, the lab videos are going to really hit that. I got pretty detailed the blood types with the lab videos. All right, give me a second here. Any questions so far? Oh, go over 41 and 42. Okay, hold on. Okay, so urobilinogen is a byproduct of bilirubin. Okay, so at some point, bilirubin is broken down. And it's broken down by gut bacteria. Okay, this is part of the microbiome. You could also say like healthy bacteria, like probiotic stuff. Okay. So, you know, pretty much everything in our body at some point is broken down, degraded. The bilirubin is eventually broken down, and when it is, it turns into urobilinogen. Okay, and some parts, some of the components of this breakdown are recycled. Okay, and some components you get rid of. So like, for example, you poop it out. Or you can pee it out. And that's one of the ways our body detoxes, right? We can sweat things out and we use the bathroom just to get rid of stuff. Okay, the sterocobalamin, I think I misspelled that. Nope, we're good. Okay, this is pigment. Okay, from the end of the heme breakdown. Okay, this is what gives stool its brown color. The breakdown is also done by gut bacteria. Okay. And heme means iron containing compound. So you have a heme plus a protein such as hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is a protein. Okay, so good on that one? Okay, you're welcome. Okay, let me get to the cardio. All right. Oh, let me share that. Hold on. Okay, so you should be seeing the cardio. Okay. So in the heart, actually, yeah. So this the anatomy I'm going to be posting actually just in a little bit later today. Okay, so let me share something quickly on that. It'll be this. Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's all anatomy stuff. There's also some lab stuff too that I'll be posting later. All right, so let's see. Layers of the heart, starting with the outside most, you have the pericardium. And then the epicardium, and then the myo, and then the endocardium. Okay, it's a serous fluid. There's a serous fluid around the heart, and it's in between the pericardium and the epicardium. Okay, the fluid is in between the pericardium and the myocardium. Excuse me, the pericardium and the epicardium. And it is designed to reduce friction as the heart is beating. Okay, the atria, their function is to receive blood. Function of the atria is to receive blood. Function of the ventricles is to eject blood. The myocardium is the thickest layer of the heart. Okay, the bundle of His, and what's the AKA? That would be the bundle branches. Okay, and that's where you have the nerves that come in before they split, right? That's the bundle branch. The bundle of His, I talked about that in the lecture notes, but it's a site of electrical conduction where the nerves come together, the bundle branches. And then they bifurcate into the right and left bundle branches, and the right and left bundle branches. And then those go up the heart and turn into the Purkinje fibers. Okay, so yeah, no blood flow through the heart. As well as entering the heart from the body, it would start with the superior and inferior vena cava, flow into the right atria, then right ventricle. Okay, so right atria, then the right ventricle, and then going to go through the pulmonary valve, through the pulmonary trunk, through the right and left pulmonary arteries. to the lungs. And then it's going back to the heart, so it has to go through the right and left pulmonary veins. That goes into the left atrium. Oh, I missed a step up here. Right atrium, it goes through the tricuspid valve, and then into the right ventricle. Okay. So as blood is returning to the heart, it goes into the left atrium, and then it has to pass through the bicuspid valve to left ventricle, through the aortic valve, and then aorta, and then to the body. Okay, so that would be the order. And the sinoatrial node is a specialized nerve inside the atria of the heart. Right, so there's the upper chambers, there's the lower chambers. On the video, sort of in a diagram that we did, where the nerve comes in and hits the sinus area. That's the pacemaker of the heart. The SA node is the pacemaker of the heart. So the electrical signal comes in. The atrioventricular is located about there. That's another nerve that comes in and gets acted upon to allow for electrical contraction of the heart. Okay, so all right, you got the P wave, QRS, and then T wave. All right. So the P wave see. Depolarization is going to be synonymous with contraction, and repolarize is going to be synonymous with relax. So we have squeeze, relax, squeeze, relax. Okay, so depolarization means to squeeze or contract. Okay. So share this with you. Okay, this just makes it easier rather than me drawing it out. Okay, so the P wave is going to represent the atria contracting. Okay, so they are squeezing. Okay, now when that happens, it's going to eject blood into the right ventricle. Okay, so as blood is going into the right atrium, and then the atria squeeze, it's going to eject blood into the right ventricle. Okay. Then the QRS complex is where the ventricles are now squeezing. Or contracting. Okay. Now keep in mind, this next thing I'm going to say is always opposite. If the atria are contracting, the ventricles are relaxing. If the ventricles are contracting, then the atria are relaxing. It's always opposite. Okay. So QRS is where the ventricles are squeezing. And because the ventricles are so large and eject a lot of blood, especially the left ventricle, the contraction, the computer that's picking up on this, the spike is going to be greater. Okay. Then after the ventricles relax, after the ventricles squeeze, then it's going to be followed by ventricular relaxation. Okay, then they're repolarizing. Repolarizing is relaxing. Okay, now here's another thing to remember. If the ventricles are relaxing, that means they are filling with blood. If the ventricles are relaxing, they are filling with blood. If the atria are relaxing, that means they are filling with blood. Okay? If any of those chambers are contracting, that means they are ejecting blood. So if the atria are contracting or depolarizing, that means they are getting rid of blood. If the ventricles are depolarizing, which means they're squeezing, which means they're contracting, that means they are ejecting blood. Okay. Can we go over 33? Yeah, let me get there. Share 33. What is the millivolt of the threshold of EKG? All right. Actually, I think when I wrote that, I meant that for skeletal muscle. Yeah, so yeah, I don't think I go over that part, so my bad on that. Let's see. Yeah, this one. Oh, crap. Sorry. I just did the stop share. Didn't mean to do that. Okay, so let me get back to that. Okay, so we're just going to ignore that question because it's not something I went over in the notes, the PowerPoints and all that. Okay. All right, so ignore number 33. Okay, and I'll take that out actually. When I was writing this review, since we were talking about muscle contraction, my mind went to skeletal muscle for depolarization. But not for heart stuff, because that's a whole different concept there that I don't want to get into. Okay, let's see. So the systolic sound, okay, this is the classic lub dub of the heart. The lub is where the ventricles are squeezing. Okay, lub, the ventricles are squeezing, depolarizing, contracting. And dub is where the ventricles are relaxing or repolarizing. And this is blood pressure, so like 120 over 80 would be systolic over diastolic. Okay. Diastolic is the ventricles relaxing. Okay, K is potassium, Ca is calcium. And these are important for contraction of the heart. So we need fuel and we need electricity. And the electricity is done through ions. So calcium, sodium, potassium. So if these are out of range, you can have heart contraction problems and even, skeletal muscle contraction problems. Okay, viscosity is how thick or thin fluid is. Okay, blood likes to be, all right, let me say that better. Distilled water has a viscosity of 1.0. Blood has a viscosity of about 3 to 4. Okay, so you don't want blood to be too thick. If the blood is too thick, that means you have increased viscosity, which means the pump has to work harder to push thick fluid through the tubes. Okay, and a lot of that's done through diet. Some people, their diet is so awful that, in combination with being dehydrated, that their blood is just way too thick. And so that changes their blood pressure. Okay, so we talked about this a minute ago. What is happening to the ventricles? Oh, no, we didn't, because these are talking about the valves. Okay, so what is happening to the ventricles if the AV valves are open? Okay, so here's your general rule. If the AV valves are open, I'm going to write down a bunch of things here. So if AV, which is atrioventricular valves, which is the bicuspid and tricuspid, which actually that's down here. Okay, so this is going to answer some questions down below. If the AV valves are open, the semilunars are closed. Okay, always. And these are also always opposite. Okay, you're just going to have to trust the formula. It's always opposite. So if the AV valves are open, the semilunar valves are closed. If the semilunar valves are open, then the AV valves are closed. All right, they're always opposite. Okay, so the semilunars are the pulmonary and aortic semilunar valves. Aortic and pulmonary semilunar valves. Okay, so what is happening? All right, let's just go through these. Okay, what is happening to the ventricle? What is happening to the ventricles if the AV valves are open? Okay. So the ventricles, that means they are squeezing. Excuse me. That means they are relaxing. Okay. Now think about this. If the ventricles are squeezing, it is pushing blood through the semilunars. If the ventricles are squeezing, it is pushing blood through the semilunars. The right ventricle is pushing blood through the pulmonary valve, pulmonary semilunar valve, and the left ventricle is squeezing blood through the aortic semilunar valve. So when the ventricles are squeezing, the semilunars are open, so therefore the AV valves are closed. Okay, so that means that the AV valves are open. Now, obviously, this can get confusing, so you have to really pay attention to what the question is asking. If the AV valves are open, okay, the semilunars are closed. If the ventricle is squeezing, if the ventricles are squeezing, then the semilunars are open, the AV valves are closed. So what is happening to the ventricles if the AV valves are open? Well, it's relaxing. What does this mean the ventricles are doing if the AV valves are open? Well, we just answered that. The ventricles are relaxing. Okay, what is happening to the atria if the AV valves are open? Okay, so remember, if the atria squeeze, okay, that means the AV valves are open and the semilunars are closed. So that means they are contracting. Okay, what is happening to the atria if the AV valves are closed? The atria are relaxing. Okay, what is happening to the semilunar valves if the AV valves are open? And they're always the opposite. So if the AV valves are open, semilunars are closed. Okay, if the AV valves are closed, semilunars are open. Okay. What are the ventricles doing if the semilunars are closed? The ventricles are relaxing. Okay. What is the ventricle doing if the semilunars are open? That means they are contracting or squeezing. What are the atria doing if the semilunar valves are open? The atria would be, if the atria squeeze, and there's your heart, right? So there's the atria. If they're contracting, that means the AV valves are open. What are the atria doing? The semilunar valves are closed. They are contracting. Okay, and these are always opposite. If the AV valves are open, semilunars are closed. The AV valves are closed, semilunars are open. Okay. So S1 is produced when the ventricles squeeze, S2 is produced when the ventricles relax. If the ventricles are contracting, the atria are relaxing. If the atria are contracting, the ventricles are, because they're always opposite. If the ventricles are relaxing, the atria are contracting. If the atria are relaxing, the ventricles are contracting. Okay, what chambers squeeze in order to feel the pulse? That would be the left ventricle. Okay, a number is graded 1 through 6. The least is a 1, the greatest is a 6. In fact, a 6 can be so loud you can hear it without a stethoscope. Okay. Okay, why would the heart change its pressure? Well, it's going to depend on the circumstances, right? So for example, if you're exercising, you want it to change its pressure. If you're laying down sleeping, you want the pressure to go down, right? So the heart changes its pressure to keep you in homeostasis. So if you start exercising and your pressure doesn't change, you're probably going to pass out, right? You're exercising, you're running, and the heart stays at rest. Yeah, you won't make it. Okay, so the pressure and all that has to change. Okay, the baroreceptors detect changes in pressure. Chemoreceptors detect changes in the body chemistry, such as CO2 and acidity, and they are found in the carotid sinus and the aortic arch. Okay, the nerve responsible is cranial nerve 10, which is the vagus nerve. Okay, so all right, so I'm going to show you, I think fixed formula is in here. Okay, this is okay, fixed formula. I don't think I actually physically wrote it in there. All right. Okay, so to understand fixed formula is to understand this, okay? And um, so factors that influence peripheral resistance. Okay, one of them is a small tube and a large tube, okay? Um, so when you have a small tube, you're going to have increased peripheral resistance. And when you have a large tube, you're going to have decreased peripheral resistance, okay? So with increased peripheral resistance, means increase in blood pressure. Decrease in peripheral resistance means decreased blood pressure. All right. So, um, your heart can detect, your body can detect if the tubes are too small, okay? So the peripheral tissue and the concentration difference is what is fixed formula is trying to calculate. Now, I'm not going to have you do any actual calculations, but it's more of understanding what determines cardiac output. Okay? And part of that has to do with the smaller the tube, your cardiac output changes because of increased peripheral resistance. The larger the tube, the cardiac output changes because of decreased peripheral resistance. Okay, the autonomic nervous system. We have the sympathetics and the parasympathetics. Sympathetics is stress. Parasympathetics is relax. So what does the heart do if you're stressed? Increases heart rate, increases blood pressure. If you're relaxed, the heart has resting heart rate and decreased blood pressure. Okay. The neurotransmitter that is released is epinephrine, norepinephrine, and that's what puts you in sympathetics. The neurotransmitter released in the peripheral nervous system is acetylcholine, and that is what puts you in rest and digest mode or relax mode. The myocardium will enlarge with chronic exercise, not a bad thing. It's a muscle, it just increases in size. The atherosclerosis are deposits on the inside of the walls of the artery, and arteriosclerosis is hardening of the artery. MI is myocardial infarction or heart attack. And if a person's blood pressure is way too low, they can pass out. Okay. Okay, any questions? All right, buddy. And I'll try to get these, I recorded this, I'll try to get that posted for everyone. All right, well, have a wonderful rest of the weekend, okay? Thanks. All right, talk to you later, Alex, and everyone.